White Lady at Taft Avenue. Imagine driving late at night on a quiet, dimly lit road in the heart of Manila. The air is heavy, and the only sound is the faint hum of your car's engine. Suddenly, without warning, a woman in a long white dress appears in your back seat. Her face, pale and expressionless, her eyes filled with sorrow. What would you do? How would you react? In Manila, Taft Avenue is known for its bustling atmosphere during the day, with students and professionals filling its lanes. But when night falls, the road takes on a different character. Shadows grow long, and the few brave souls driving through are haunted by more than just the city's history. They fear the White Lady of Taft Avenue. Taft Avenue, stretching past historic landmarks and old institutions, becomes eerie when night descends. Massive acacia trees line the road, their thick branches blocking the streetlights. The buildings nearby, cloaked in shadows, seem to retreat into darkness, leaving the road ominous and foreboding. Many say the street feels empty, abandoned, as though it's been waiting for something or someone. The White Lady has haunted this road for decades, and her presence is unmistakable to those who have seen her. She appears in a flowing white dress with long black hair cascading down her back. Some say her face is covered, while others claim she stares at them through the rearview mirror, her eyes hollow and haunting. She has been known to suddenly appear in the back seats of taxis or alongside vehicles, only to vanish as quickly as she appeared. There are countless stories about who she was before becoming the spectral figure who now haunts Taft Avenue. Some say she was a college student from one of the nearby universities, returning home late at night after an evening of celebration. She had snuck out without her parents' permission, eager to meet her friends, but never made it back. Her car collided with another vehicle, and she died instantly, her spirit trapped on the road where she lost her life. Others believe her story dates back to World War II, a tragic tale of violence during the Japanese occupation. Some say she was a young woman who was abducted, tortured, and killed by soldiers. Her spirit, restless and vengeful, continues to wander the streets, searching for the men who wronged her. But perhaps the most chilling version is one that sends shivers down the spines of local taxi drivers. Many believe that the White Lady was a victim of a violent crime, attacked by a driver who picked her up on that very road. He assaulted and killed her, leaving her body hidden in the shadows. Since then, she has been seen by numerous drivers, her ghost appearing in their rearview mirrors, staring at them in silent accusation. Some say she's looking for revenge. Others believe she's searching for help. But every driver knows the rules: never look back. The stories have persisted for years, passed down through generations of drivers who refuse to take Taft Avenue at night. And yet, it's not just the locals who have felt her presence. Famous celebrities like Maris Rakal have shared spine-chilling encounters with the White Lady, describing the same dark figure who vanishes without a trace. One particularly horrifying encounter involved a taxi driver named Rico. He had heard the stories of Taft Avenue, but he was skeptical until one night, on a quiet drive, he felt the air turn cold. The smell of flowers, old and musty, filled the cab. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw her, a woman in white, sitting motionless in the back seat. His heart raced as he locked eyes with her through the mirror. But just as he was about to pull over, she disappeared. Shaken, Rico never drove down Taft Avenue again. Even now, drivers speak in hushed tones about the White Lady. Many claim they've heard her voice, soft and distant, asking for a ride. Some have felt a cold hand brush their shoulder, only to turn around and find their car empty. Whether you believe the tales or not, Taft Avenue holds a sense of mystery that no other road in Manila can claim. It draws thrill seekers and ghost hunters alike, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the White Lady. But be careful what you wish for. Those who have seen her in her rarely forget the experience. So the next time you find yourself driving late at night on a quiet, dark road, keep your eyes on the road ahead, because who knows, you might just find a mysterious passenger in your back seat. The Headless Priest. It was a late night at the prestigious University of Santo Tomas in Manila, a place steeped in history where the walls seemed to whisper forgotten secrets. Emily, a diligent student, sat in the nearly deserted library, her eyes weary from hours of studying for an upcoming exam. The clock struck midnight, and the campus fell into a deep silence, broken only by the occasional rustling of papers or the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. The air in the room suddenly felt colder, and a shiver ran down her spine. As she packed her things to leave, she heard something strange, a faint, metallic clanking sound, as if chains were being dragged across the floor. At first, she dismissed it as her tired mind playing tricks, but the noise grew louder, echoing through the quiet halls of the library. Her curiosity piqued. Emily cautiously stood up and moved toward the sound, her heart pounding in her chest. She walked down the dimly lit corridor, the sound getting closer and closer. Suddenly, there it was, standing at the end of the hallway, a figure dressed in the traditional black robes of a priest, but something was horribly wrong. The priest had no head. The headless priest moved slowly, as if searching for something, dragging heavy chains behind him. Emily froze, terror gripping her as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. The figure stopped, turning in her direction, though it had no eyes to see her. It raised a hand as if beckoning her to come closer. Panic surged through her veins, and she took a step back, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. The headless priest moved closer, the sound of the chains growing louder, each metallic clank sending waves of fear through her. This was no dream. This was one of the infamous ghost stories passed down for generations. The legend of the Headless Priest of Intramuros, a haunting spirit that roamed the university grounds and nearby churches. These apparitions were said to be the restless souls of clergymen who had been beheaded during the darkest periods of Philippine history. During the Spanish colonial period, priests were more than just religious figures. They were also educators and leaders in the community. However, during the Philippine Revolution, some priests were accused of siding with the Spanish forces and were targeted by Filipino revolutionaries. In brutal acts of defiance, many were executed, their heads severed as a symbol of rebellion. Later, during World War II, Japanese soldiers also decapitated several priests in acts of cruelty, leaving behind a legacy of bloodshed and sorrow. The headless priest is said to roam places of significance, universities, churches, and graveyards, still bound to the mortal world by their violent deaths. Some claim that they carry their heads in their hands, while others wander aimlessly, forever searching for the heads that were taken from them. As Emily stood frozen in fear, the headless priest came closer, dragging its chains, which now seemed to wrap around her very soul. She wanted to scream, to run, but something held her in place, as though she was being drawn into the priest's world of eternal suffering. The sound of the chains echoed louder, a deafening noise that seemed to come from all around her. And then, just as the priest was within arm's reach, Emily snapped out of her trance. She turned and bolted down the hallway, her footsteps pounding against the floor as she ran toward the exit. The chains clattered behind her, faster and faster. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and her vision blurred with tears of fear. She burst out of the library and into the cold night air, the chains still ringing in her ears. When she finally dared to look back, the headless priest was gone, swallowed by the darkness of the library. The next day, Emily learned she wasn't the first to encounter the terrifying ghost. Older students had whispered about the headless priest of Santo Tomas, warning newcomers to avoid the library at night. Many claimed to have seen the spectral figure, while others spoke of feeling an unexplainable presence when passing by the old churches and graveyards in Intramuros. Legends say that these headless priests are trapped between the world of the living and the dead, forever searching for their heads or for those responsible for their deaths. They are drawn to places like universities and churches, places they once served in life, now cursed to haunt in death. Some priests are said to be looking for justice, while others simply want to find peace. Emily never returned to the library late at night again, but the image of the headless priest haunted her dreams. She knew the story wasn't just a myth. There was something real, something tragic about the wandering spirits of Manila's past. Flying coffin. Coffins are unsettling enough on their own, often invoking a deep sense of dread and goosebumps at the mere sight. But imagine walking alone late at night, the stillness of the road broken only by the soft rustle of leaves, and suddenly seeing a coffin, not lying on the ground, but hovering mid-air, moving as though it had a purpose of its own. It's an image that would freeze anyone in their tracks, turning fear into full-blown panic. This is the tale of the flying coffin of Cavite, one of the most terrifying urban legends ever whispered in hushed voices across the Philippines. This eerie story is deeply embedded in Filipino folklore, passed down through generations, and famously featured in the Halloween special of the popular television show Magandang Gabi Bayan. But unlike most ghost stories, this one isn't confined to the realm of fiction. Locals in Cavite still speak of it, especially around Halloween, when the spirits are believed to roam more freely. The story begins with a man named Nardo, a simple farmer living in the outskirts of Cavite. One late evening, Nardo had stayed out longer than usual, tending to his crops in a remote field far from the town. The road leading home was long and deserted, with only the occasional street lamp flickering weakly. He pulled his jacket tighter around him as the cold wind picked up, feeling an odd heaviness in the air that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. It was a path he had taken countless times before, yet tonight, something felt different. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting an eerie darkness over the road. As he neared an old, twisted balete tree, one that the townspeople always warned children to stay away from, he noticed something strange in the distance. A shadow, barely visible at first, appeared in the middle of the road. Nardo squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It was a coffin. But what sent a wave of icy terror through him was that this coffin was not resting on the ground. It was floating, hovering a few feet in the air as if carried by invisible hands. His breath caught in his throat as the coffin slowly turned toward him, almost as if it had sensed his presence. Nardo stumbled back, his heart racing, his legs suddenly feeling like they were made of stone. The coffin moved closer, its wooden frame creaking with every inch it advanced. There was no one else on the road, no one to call out to for help. Terrified, Nardo found himself rooted in place, unable to tear his gaze away from the sight. The coffin's lid creaked open slightly, and inside he thought he saw movement, shadows shifting unnaturally within. His pulse quickened, and a wave of nausea hit him as an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. He knew he had to run, but his body refused to cooperate. As the coffin floated closer, Nardo's mind raced with memories of old tales, stories his grandparents used to tell him when he was a boy. They spoke of restless spirits trapped between worlds, seeking revenge or redemption. Could this be one of those spirits? Was the coffin searching for someone, or worse, for him? Suddenly, a chilling wail echoed through the night, piercing the silence and breaking the spell that held Nardo in place. His feet finally responded, and he bolted down the road, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the coffin seemed to follow, gliding through the air with an unnatural grace. He could hear the chains rattling inside it, the sound of something or someone trapped within. He ran as fast as he could, his footsteps pounding against the pavement, but the coffin kept up, never slowing, never stopping. Nardo's vision blurred with tears of fear as the ghostly wail grew louder. In his mind, he could almost feel the coffin pulling him closer, like it wanted to drag him into whatever nightmare lay inside. Just as he thought he couldn't run any longer, Nardo reached the edge of the village, where the faint glow of lights from the nearby houses brought a small sense of hope. The moment his feet touched the boundary of the village, the wailing stopped. He turned around, breathless and drenched in cold sweat. The coffin had vanished, leaving only the sound of the wind rustling the leaves of the balete tree. The next day, Nardo told his story to the villagers, his voice trembling as he recalled the horror of the night before. Some laughed it off as the result of overwork and an overactive imagination, while others, the older ones, exchanged knowing glances, their faces grim. They had heard similar stories before about a flying coffin that appeared to those who wandered alone at night, a curse tied to the old balete tree that was said to guard the restless spirits of the dead. It was said that long ago, a wealthy Spanish family in Cavite had lost their youngest son to a mysterious illness, Grief-stricken, the family buried him under the belede tree, hoping the tree's supposed magical powers would protect his spirit. But the boy's death had not been peaceful. His soul, it was believed, became trapped inside the coffin, forever seeking release. The coffin, now cursed, would float through the night, searching for new victims to join him in his restless journey. The story of the flying coffin continues to send chills down the spines of those who hear it, especially during the eerie quiet of October nights. Many claim to have seen it: taxi drivers passing by late at night, students walking home from class, even motorists who swear they saw a floating wooden box glide across the road before vanishing into the darkness. To this day, locals in Cavite avoid that road after dark, especially when passing by the twisted old belete tree. Nardo, now older and wiser, never took the same path home again. The memory of that night haunted him for years, a grim reminder that in the quietest corners of the world, there are things we are not meant to understand and perhaps never should. Souls in Diplomat Hotel. Going on a vacation to a cool and serene place like Baguio City is a dream for many. With its pine-scented air and rolling mist, it's the perfect escape from the tropical heat. But what if the place you're staying in was once a site of unspeakable horrors, where the cries of the past still linger and restless spirits roam the halls? This is the grim reality of the Diplomat Hotel, a once stately structure perched atop Dominican Hill, now a magnet for ghost hunters and thrill seekers from around the world. The Diplomat Hotel wasn't always a hotel. Originally built in the early 1900s, it was designed to be a grand vacation house for Spanish missionaries, priests, nuns, and other members of the clergy. The building exuded grandeur, its halls echoing with laughter and prayer. But during World War II, the hotel's fate took a tragic turn. When the Japanese army invaded the Philippines, they seized the hotel and turned it into their stronghold. According to local stories, the hotel became the site of a gruesome massacre. The Japanese forces gathered everyone staying there, men, women, priests, nuns, and even children, into different rooms. One by one, they were tortured and killed. Some were shot, others were beheaded, and many were mercilessly stabbed. The heart of the building, where a beautiful fountain once stood, became a graveyard for the innocent. Children, in particular, were said to have been massacred there, their young lives brutally cut short. The hotel's once beautiful exterior became stained with blood and sorrow. After the war, the building was left abandoned for years until it was converted into the Diplomat Hotel in the 1970s. But even after its transformation, the hotel could not escape the weight of its dark past. Guests who checked in reported strange occurrences: lights flickering on and off, disembodied voices whispering through the halls, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Some even claimed to see the apparitions of nuns and priests walking through the corridors, their heads missing, carrying the echoes of their violent deaths. One of the most terrifying encounters involved a young couple, Jomar and Lisa, who decided to stay at the Diplomat Hotel during a romantic weekend getaway. They were drawn by the building's historical charm and the promise of a quiet retreat. But what started as a peaceful vacation soon turned into a nightmare. On their first night, Lisa woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of soft footsteps outside their room. Thinking it was a fellow guest, she dismissed it at first. But as the minutes ticked by, the footsteps grew louder, echoing down the empty corridor. She nudged Jomar awake, and they both listened, frozen in bed. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside their door. Summoning his courage, Jomar got up to check. When he opened the door, no one was there, but the air felt heavy, suffocating, and cold. Just as he was about to close the door, they both heard it. A distant cry, faint but unmistakable, like a child sobbing in the distance. Lisa's blood ran cold as she remembered the stories about the fountain, the children who had been killed there. Unable to sleep, they decided to leave the room and walk around the hotel to shake off the unease. As they passed by the old fountain, they saw a shadowy figure standing near the edge. It was a woman, dressed in a tattered nun's habit. At first, they thought it was a trick of the light, but as they moved closer, the figure turned toward them, and they saw that her face was missing, her head completely gone. Lisa screamed, and Jomar grabbed her, pulling her back toward the hotel entrance. But as they ran, they felt something cold brush against them, like invisible hands trying to pull them back. The sobbing grew louder, filling their ears, until they finally burst through the front doors and out into the safety of the parking lot. The next morning, shaken but determined, they checked out early. As they left, one of the staff approached them. "It's common," she said quietly. "Many guests see them, the souls trapped here, unable to move on." The Diplomat Hotel's haunting isn't confined to random tourists like Jamar and Lisa. Many ghost hunters have reported capturing eerie photographs of shadowy figures. And EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, have recorded chilling voices calling for help. The most famous of these spirits are the headless nuns and priests, believed to be victims of the Japanese occupation. Their apparitions are often seen wandering the halls at night, searching for peace that never comes. In one particular case, a group of paranormal investigators decided to stay overnight at the hotel. Armed with cameras and audio equipment, they hoped to document the legendary spirits. As midnight approached, they set up their gear near the fountain, the site of the children's massacre. Suddenly, one of their cameras malfunctioned. The screen flickered, and in the brief moments before it shut off completely, a ghostly figure appeared. A small child, standing by the water, staring directly into the lens. The investigators felt a cold breeze sweep through the area, and the sound of a child's laughter filled the air. They quickly packed up and left, but the footage remained burned into their minds. The Diplomat Hotel's cold, eerie atmosphere contrasts sharply with the beauty of Baguio City's scenic views. Though many come to the city for its tranquil climate, the Diplomat remains a place of unrest, a monument to the souls who met tragic ends within its walls. Even now, the hotel stands abandoned, its windows empty, its walls echoing with the past. Those brave enough to enter often leave with more questions than answers. Who are these restless spirits? Are they seeking justice, or are they trapped in an endless cycle of torment, reliving the horrors of their deaths? One thing is certain. Within the walls of the Diplomat Hotel, the past is never truly gone. It lingers, waiting to be seen, heard, and felt by those who dare to venture too close. Laperal White House. In the heart of Baguio City, where the misty air clings to the pine trees and the cold wind whispers through the mountains, stands the Laperal White House, an imposing structure shrouded in mystery and fear. Built during the early 1900s, it was once a grand residence for the Laperal family, who lived there for many years. However, over time, the house has gained a reputation not for its beauty or grandeur, but for the restless souls said to haunt its halls. What was once a symbol of safety and family has now become a place where the past refuses to rest, a home for lost souls who never found peace. One of the first eerie incidents occurred when the caretaker asked the security guard to cut down a fortune plant near the house. It seemed like a harmless task, but after the guard completed the job, something strange happened. He suddenly collapsed and could not stand. His entire body was racked with pain, as if invisible hands were gripping his muscles and bones, refusing to let go. Despite several medical examinations, no one could explain his condition. The locals, however, whispered that the fortune plant was more than just a tree, that it had roots connected to the supernatural, and cutting it down may have angered the spirits that lingered in the house. Another caretaker, Mang Shelso, had his own chilling encounter. One night, while making his rounds, he began to hear banging sounds coming from inside the house. Windows and doors slammed shut repeatedly, even though no one was inside. The wind was calm that night, and the house should have been quiet. But it wasn't. The noise grew louder and more frantic, as if the spirits themselves were demanding attention. Mang Celso's wife, who was working abroad, often called him late at night to check on him. One night, during one of their usual phone conversations, she suddenly paused. "Who's the girl with you?" she asked, her voice uneasy. Mang Celso froze. He was alone in the house, at least that's what he thought. "There's no one here," he replied, but his wife insisted. She had clearly heard a girl's voice on the other end of the line, softly whispering something unintelligible. The house has always had its share of ghostly sightings, but perhaps the most infamous spirit is the White Lady. Many who have visited the house claim to have seen her, an ethereal figure in a flowing white dress, her face pale and expressionless. She is often spotted at the third step of the grand staircase, staring blankly at anyone brave enough to look at her. Her presence alone is enough to send chills down the spine of even the most skeptical of visitors. But the White Lady isn't the only spirit lurking in the Laperal White House. Maria, a curious college student from Manila, decided to visit the house with her friends during their summer break. They had heard all the ghost stories, but like many, they didn't believe them. It was all just folklore, right? So, armed with their phones and cameras, they set out to explore the supposedly haunted house. Upon entering, the atmosphere was thick with an eerie stillness. The house seemed to breathe with them, its wooden floors creaking beneath their feet. As they made their way through the dimly lit rooms, they could feel a sense of being watched. One of Maria's friends, Paulo, was recording the entire experience, hoping to capture something paranormal on camera. But as they neared the staircase, something unexpected happened. A cold gust of wind swept through the room, even though all the windows were shut tight. Maria looked up at the third step of the stairs, and there she saw her, the White Lady, standing motionless, her dark eyes fixed on them. Her form was almost transparent, but her presence was undeniable. Maria gasped, her heart racing, and grabbed Paulo's arm. But when he turned to look, the White Lady was gone. Terrified, they ran outside, but as they caught their breath in the garden, Paulo checked his camera. His hand trembled as he showed the footage to Maria. There, clear as day, was the figure of the White Lady staring straight at the camera, as if she knew they were watching. Their experience didn't end there. That night, back at their hotel, strange things began to happen. Maria woke in the middle of the night to the sound of soft footsteps pacing outside her room. At first, she thought it was someone from the hotel, but the steps didn't sound like ordinary footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and echoed unnaturally down the hallway. When she opened her door, no one was there, but the cold air around her suggested otherwise. The next morning, Maria learned that Paulo had experienced something far worse. He had woken up to find his room freezing cold, despite the heater being on full blast, and on his bathroom mirror, written in fog, were the words, "Come back." The Laperal White House, once a symbol of wealth and family, had become a prison for the spirits trapped within its walls. It's believed that during the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, several people, including women and children, were tortured and killed in the house. Their souls, unable to move on, remain in a state of unrest, haunting anyone who dares to enter. Today, the Laperal White House is a popular destination for ghost hunters and thrill seekers, but it remains a place of fear for the locals. The spirits that linger there are not playful. They are angry, tormented, and seeking justice for the brutal ends they met. So if you ever find yourself in Baguio, standing outside the imposing Laperal White House, you might think twice before entering. The spirits within are watching, waiting, and they may not be so willing to let you leave. Souls in Paco Cemetery. Imagine visiting a serene park with towering trees and old stone walls, where families gather, children play, and friends relax. Now, what if that peaceful park was once a burial ground, filled with the souls of the dead, their presence still lingering in the air? This is the eerie reality of Paco Park in Manila, a place with a history as dark as the shadows cast by its ancient trees. Back in the 1800s, the city of Manila was gripped by a deadly cholera epidemic. People were dying in droves, and the authorities had no choice but to bury the victims in a special cemetery, Paco Cemetery. This cemetery became the final resting place for hundreds, if not thousands, of souls. And while the cemetery has since been transformed into a beautiful park, the spirits of those who were buried there still seem to haunt the grounds. One of the most unsettling tales from Paco Cemetery involves a park supervisor named Mang Ruben. After a long day of work, Mang Ruben decided to rest under a large santol tree that stood in the middle of the park. The evening was calm and the air cool, perfect for a peaceful nap. He wrapped himself in a blanket and quickly dozed off. But in the middle of the night, something strange happened. Mang Rubin felt a tug on his blanket. Thinking it was just the wind, he tried to pull it back, but the force persisted. It felt as though unseen hands were playing with him, tugging at the fabric with more strength. His heart pounded as he realized that no one else was around. Terrified, he leaped to his feet, clutching his blanket as he scanned the dark park for any signs of a prankster. But there was no one in sight, just the gentle rustling of the trees. Trembling, Mang Rubin gathered his belongings and left, vowing never to sleep in the park again. But his story is not the only one. One night, a security guard named Nestor was assigned to patrol the park. Like Mang Rubin, Nestor decided to rest under the same santol tree. As he drifted off to sleep, a voice echoed through the darkness, soft but clear. 1907, Margarita Miguel. Startled, Nestor sat up and looked around, but no one was there. The voice came again, this time closer, repeating the same words. 1907, Margarita Miguel. Before Nestor could react, a ghostly figure appeared before him, a woman in a wedding dress, her eyes filled with sorrow. The bride stood there, staring at him, her form flickering like a fading memory. Nestor, now wide awake and trembling with fear, quickly stood up and searched the gravestones for the name Margarita Miguel. His heart raced as he scanned the dates and inscriptions. Finally, he found it, a tombstone from 1907 bearing the name Margarita Miguel. The woman had been dead for over a century, yet her spirit had not found peace. Another eerie encounter occurred when a group of young dancers decided to use the park for their practice. Paco Park's old-world charm made it the perfect backdrop for a performance, and they wanted to capture their routine on camera. As they danced and filmed, everything seemed normal until they reviewed the footage later that evening. In the background, they saw something chilling, a child running quickly behind them, moving so fast that it was barely a blur on camera. The problem? No children had been in the park that day, and no one had seen anyone pass by during their rehearsal. The park's unsettling reputation attracted the attention of a local TV crew who decided to film a Halloween special on the haunted grounds. As they set up their equipment, they began to feel a strange presence. Lights flickered, and cold drafts swept through the area despite the warm evening. One crew member reported hearing whispers, and another felt an invisible hand brush against their arm. The entire team was on edge, and several crew members swore they saw shadows darting between the tombstones, moving too quickly to be human. Despite these stories, Paco Park has become one of the most popular parks in Manila, a place where people gather for events, weddings, and celebrations. The old cemetery walls still stand, and the grave markers serve as silent reminders of the souls buried beneath the surface. But even as the park bustles with life, the spirits of those long gone continue to linger. It's said that on certain nights, if you walk through the park when the air is still and the moon is full, you can still hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the old cemetery grounds. And if you're unlucky, you might even catch a glimpse of the ghostly bride of Margarita Miguel wandering the park, still searching for something or someone that will finally allow her to rest. For most, Paco Park is a place of beauty and history. But for those who know its past, it's a place where the living and the dead coexist, where memories of sorrow and loss are etched into the very stones of the earth. And as the stories continue to surface, one thing is certain: the souls of Paco Cemetery are far from at peace. Spirits in the Teacher's Camp. Nestled in the cool and foggy hills of Baguio City, the Teacher's Camp offers a serene traditional retreat for those seeking a quiet escape or an educational training ground. Built in 1908, it was originally intended as a camp for both Filipino and American teachers, where they could develop their skills and exchange knowledge. Over the decades, the camp became a cherished place for learning and growth. However, beneath its peaceful facade lies a darker, more sinister history, one filled with restless spirits and unsettling tales that send chills down the spine. During World War II, the peaceful grounds of the Teacher's Camp were transformed into a makeshift hospital for wounded soldiers. The air that once echoed with laughter and the rustling of books was now filled with groans of pain and the sobs of those on the brink of death. Soldiers were brought here, their wounds too grave for them to survive. Many died within its walls, their blood soaking into the very foundation of the camp. And it is said that their spirits still wander the grounds, unable to find peace. For years, there have been countless stories from visitors and locals alike, claiming to experience eerie, unexplainable events at the teachers' camp. One of the most frequently reported phenomena is the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, and heavy, as if someone were walking with chains around their ankles. These footsteps often echo through the long, dark hallways late at night, long after everyone has gone to bed. Ana, a young woman from Quezon City, had heard these stories but never really believed them. She and her group of friends decided to rent a room at the teachers' camp during their weekend trip to Baguio. They thought that the idea of staying at one of the most haunted places in the city would add a bit of excitement to their vacation. Little did they know how real the hauntings would become. On their first night, they spent hours laughing, eating, and sharing ghost stories. By midnight, the group had grown tired and decided to turn in. As Ana lay in bed staring at the wooden ceiling, she began to hear a faint sound, something that didn't seem to belong to the quiet, cold night. At first, she thought it was the wind or perhaps someone else in the group moving around. But the sound grew louder. It was the distinct noise of footsteps, slow and deliberate, dragging something metallic across the floor. Frozen in bed, Ana listened intently. The footsteps seemed to be coming closer. She glanced at her friends, who were all fast asleep, oblivious to the eerie sound. Gathering her courage, Ana sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound was now right outside their door. She held her breath as the footsteps stopped, and then, suddenly, she heard a soft but distinct knock. Trembling, she walked to the door and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. Before she could even comprehend what was happening, the doorknob began to rattle violently, as if someone was trying to force their way in. Ana backed away from the door in terror, but as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. The air was thick with tension, and a cold draft swept through the room. Ana could feel an invisible presence watching her, filling the room with an unbearable sense of dread. The next morning, she told her friends about what had happened, but they brushed it off as her imagination playing tricks on her. Determined to prove that what she heard was real, Ana and her friends decided to explore the camp that night. They wandered through the old buildings, their flashlights casting long shadows against the walls. The atmosphere was oppressive, as if the camp itself was alive with hidden eyes watching their every move. They ventured into one of the oldest sections of the camp, where the makeshift hospital had once stood. It was here that the energy felt the heaviest. As they entered one of the rooms, they were met with the unmistakable scent of antiseptic and old blood, though the room had long been abandoned. One of Ana's friends, Mila, froze as she saw something out of the corner of her eye. A faint, ghostly figure dressed in a white nurse's uniform standing at the far end of the room. Her face was obscured, and she seemed to be moving slowly, tending to an invisible patient on the bed. Before anyone could react, the room plunged into icy coldness, and the door behind them slammed shut. The group panicked, desperately pulling at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The sound of chains dragging across the floor echoed through the room, and a low moaning filled the air. Ana turned, and to her horror saw the figure of a man standing in the corner, his face contorted in pain, a chain wrapped tightly around his ankle, dragging behind him as he took slow, tortured steps toward them. The group screamed as the figure moved closer, his expression one of torment and rage. Just as he was about to reach them, the door suddenly flew open, and the group rushed out into the cold night, hearts racing, fear coursing through their veins. After that night, Ana and her friends left the camp early, too terrified to stay any longer. They would later learn that many visitors before them had reported seeing the same chained soldier, endlessly walking the halls, bound by the agony of his final moments. The most notorious spirit of all, however, is the White Lady, often seen near the camp's main building. Many have spotted her at midnight, wandering aimlessly, her face pale and her eyes empty. It is said that she was once a teacher who met a tragic end at the camp, though no one knows the true story behind her death. What they do know is that her presence brings an overwhelming feeling of sadness and despair, as if she is trapped in her own eternal sorrow. Even today, the teachers' camp remains a popular venue for training and events, but it's also a place where the past refuses to be forgotten. Visitors continue to report sightings of the restless spirits that roam the grounds, and while many come for the history and the beauty of Baguio, few leave without feeling the weight of the souls that linger in the camp's shadowed halls. So if you're ever asked to stay a night at the teacher's camp, the question remains, will you be able to close your eyes and sleep, knowing that the spirits of the past may be watching? Ghosts in Manila Post Office. Before the age of phones and the internet, letters were the primary means of communication. But what if one of those letters delivered to you wasn't from the living, but from a ghost? This is the eerie reality at the Manila Post Office, a grand building that hides a dark past beneath its magnificent exterior. Located in the heart of Manila, the post office is an architectural marvel that once buzzed with activity, serving as the hub for sending and receiving letters. But while the building stands tall and majestic, there's something sinister lurking in its corridors. Stories of strange encounters have haunted the staff for decades, with whispers of ghostly figures, eerie sounds, and tragic spirits. One of the most unsettling tales comes from a security guard, Mang Celso, who had been working at the Manila post office for years. Late one evening, as he patrolled the empty halls, he heard something strange. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, as if someone were dragging something behind them. As the sound grew closer, Mang Celso froze. The clanking of chains echoed in the quiet night, sending chills down his spine. He turned, expecting to see a coworker, but instead, he saw nothing but an empty corridor. The footsteps and chains continued, moving past him as if an invisible prisoner was walking right beside him. Shaken, Mang Celso hurried out of the hallway, vowing never to patrol that area alone again. But Mang Celso's encounter was only the beginning. Another employee, Rosalyn, was working late one night in the office. Exhausted from sorting mail, she decided to take a break and headed to the restroom. As she washed her hands, she glanced at the mirror and noticed a flicker of movement behind her. Turning around, she saw nothing but the empty stalls. Brushing it off as fatigue, she returned to the sink. But just as she was about to leave, a shadowy figure caught her eye. Standing in the far corner was a woman dressed in white, her long hair covering her face. Rosalind's heart raced as she realized the woman wasn't just standing there. She was slowly turning towards her. Without waiting to see what happened next, Rosalind bolted out of the restroom, terrified by the silent apparition of the White Lady. The haunting doesn't stop there. Some staff members have reported seeing ghostly figures of Japanese soldiers. These soldiers seem trapped in a loop, marching through the corridors as if replaying their final moments. Tess, a longtime employee, once saw a group of these soldiers chasing a young girl down the hallway. The girl, dressed in tattered clothing, was running for her life, her face etched with terror. But no matter how fast she ran, the soldiers seemed to close in on her. And then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the entire scene vanished, leaving Tess shaken and unable to explain what she had witnessed. The Manila Post Office is believed to be haunted by the spirits of those who died during World War II. During the Japanese occupation, it is said that the building was used as a military base, and many innocent lives were lost within its walls. These restless souls seem to linger, unable to move on from the trauma they endured. A paranormal team once visited the post office to investigate the strange occurrences. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, they explored the dimly lit corridors. Almost immediately, they picked up eerie sounds, footsteps, whispers, and the unmistakable clanking of chains being dragged across the floor. The team members felt an overwhelming sense of sadness as they ventured deeper into the building. In one of the rooms, they claimed to have seen the ghostly figures of Japanese soldiers, their faces expressionless, marching endlessly through the halls. They also reported seeing women in white dresses, their clothing stained with blood, wandering aimlessly as if searching for something or someone. One of the investigators, Mark, recounted a particularly chilling moment. As he and his team walked through one of the main hallways, they heard a voice, faint but clear, whispering a message. "Help us," it said, over and over again. The voice seemed to come from all directions, filling the air with an eerie plea for aid. When they tried to communicate with the spirits, asking for a sign, they heard the unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut. Rushing to investigate, they found the door locked, but no one was inside the room. It was as if the spirits were trying to make their presence known, desperately seeking to tell their story through the only means they had left. The most terrifying encounter occurred one stormy night when the post office was nearly empty. Jun, a night shift clerk, was sorting through letters when the lights flickered and went out. The building was plunged into darkness, and all Jun could hear was the sound of rain pounding against the windows. He reached for his flashlight, but before he could turn it on, he heard something, faint whispers, growing louder by the second. "We are still here," the voices said, their words echoing through the darkened halls. Jun, paralyzed with fear, felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, followed by the distant clanking of chains. He stood frozen in place, unable to move or speak, as the unseen presence passed through the room. To this day, the Manila Post Office remains a place of mystery. By day, it functions as a hub for letters and packages, its grand facade welcoming visitors and employees alike. But by night, the building transforms into something else entirely, a place where the past refuses to stay buried, and the souls of those long gone continue to roam its corridors, seeking closure that may never come. For those brave enough to step inside after dark, the Manila Post Office offers more than just an eerie atmosphere. It offers a glimpse into a world where the living and the dead coexist, separated only by the thin veil of time. And while letters may no longer be the primary mode of communication, the spirits within the post office still find ways to send their message, one that echoes through the corridors and halls long after the last letter has been delivered. just a few feet behind them. His face was obscured, but his hands were stretched out as if begging for release. The crew was so shaken by the encounter that they packed up and left immediately, abandoning the project altogether. Even now, decades later, the Manila Film Center stands as a silent witness to the lives lost within its walls. Though the building has long been abandoned, the spirits of the workers remain trapped, their cries for justice echoing through the dark, empty halls. Passers-by have reported seeing shadowy figures lingering near the entrance, while others claim to hear whispers carried on the wind, calling out for help that will never come. Antonio, a local taxi driver, shared his own harrowing experience. Late one night, while driving past the building, his car suddenly stalled. The engine sputtered and died, leaving him stranded in front of the eerie, deserted structure. As he stepped out to check the engine, he heard a faint knock from the passenger side window. Thinking it was a passenger, he looked up, only to see a man's face, pale and ghostly, staring back at him from inside the car. The man's eyes were hollow, his mouth silently moving as if trying to speak. Antonio bolted back into the driver's seat, frantically trying to start the car. When the engine finally roared to life, the ghostly figure vanished. Shaken, Antonio sped away, never taking that route again. Today, the Manila Film Center may be nothing more than an abandoned relic, a reminder of what once was. But for those who have felt the presence of the lost souls still wandering its halls, it is much more than that. It is a graveyard in disguise, a monument to the men whose lives were cut short, their bodies forever entombed in the very structure they worked so hard to build. For anyone brave enough to visit the Manila Film Center at night, the building remains a place of shadows and unanswered cries. The souls of the workers whose bodies were never recovered continue to haunt the halls, waiting for justice that may never come. And for those who hear their cries, the question remains, would you dare step inside this house of sorrow? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share the video. See you next time.